My name is Joey. I work with Mindbus Health Support Uganda. I'm happy to welcome you to our very first episode of the Laid It Out podcast. Our aim here is to create mental health awareness in Uganda and also to share information concerning mental health. So today, joining me for this very beautiful discussion on mental health is Dr. Claire Kwagala. Claire, please say hello to our viewers.
Hello, my name is Dr. Claire Kwagala. I'm a psychiatrist. I work with Victoria Hospital and Platinum Hospital, Kampala. I'm very happy to be here. Any space that talks about mental health is a very good space for me. So thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I also have Mr. Myomba Arafat. He will also be sharing with us his personal story later on. Welcome, Arafat.
Thank you. By the name is Myomba Arafat. I'm living HIV positive, and I'm strong and bold.
Wow, that's very inspiring. So, mental health, in a layman, according to me, is the state of the mind. I would say what I feel, what are my behaviors like, what is my mood like the health of my mind. What is it like at the moment? Personally, that's how I would define mental health. Claire, what's your take?
Yeah, I would only add that to define it broadly, exactly how you've said it, that how you feel in your mind, but also in a state where you're able to fulfill your full potential as a human being, in a state where you're able to cope with the day-to-day stressors. Technically, you're supposed to cope with the stressors that are day-to-day stressors if you're in a good mental health, but also being productive to your community. So it goes beyond how you feel, but how productive are you and how much are you achieving according to your potential. Yeah.
Thank you, Claire. Arafat.
Yes, please.
What do you think of mental health? When you hear someone say mental health, how do you get it?
Mental health, I think when I hear it, because I feel like it's like something that traumatizes someone into his or her brain. Like some years back, I was married. And we separated with my wife. But to get another wife now, that thing, that mental health is my brain. Like to get someone else, it goes me back to the other time. Like that lady, when that lady separated with me. So I say, when I get another woman like today, it will be the same thing. And still we will separate. So that's how I can see that thing.
And by the way, like fear of your past recurring is also another form of mental health disorder. Like
I fear to go into that same thing of separating with someone. Yet, what can I say? Like I was so touched on my head. I loved my wife. Then there we separated from nowhere, and that thing, it is still on my
torments you up to now. I think I can relate with that fear that comes from an event. Personally, as involved in an accident with my husband, and it was a trailer that hit from behind. It was an evening, it was a rainy evening, so from that, 3 events haunted me for a while. Whenever I'd be driving and I have a trailer behind me, I would do anything to overtake the cars in front of me because I thought it was going to hit me again. And also, I hated driving when it's raining. I would literally park because I thought I'd get another accident. And also, I don't like driving at night because it happened at night. So it's actually now that we started discussing mental health that I recounted on that. And then I realized that fear is also another form of mental health disorder. Though we go through it without realizing that I might be actually suffering a disorder, but now it actually makes sense. So when he talks about the fear of getting another woman, maybe he thinks it will like replay, another woman will still leave him.
Exactly.
I can really relate with him on that.
You know, people go through different traumas, and for your case, you know, that accident, that was a very big trauma. And for his case with the wife, and so many times we don't realize the impact of the trauma. What you've just described as fear, you know, is can be part of a diagnosis of PTSD, even though that, you know, one symptom cannot diagnose the disorder. However, it contributes.
Yeah.
Because for example, PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder, and people that have suffered some kind of trauma tend to avoid, and we call it avoidance. You just avoid anything that reminds you of that trauma. For your case, you're avoiding, you know, driving, anything that resembles that kind of trauma. Sometimes it's even just talking about it. You just can't talk about it. It contributes to the symptomatology of the disorder, and other symptoms include, for example, if I can use your trauma, sometimes say you're driving and there's a loud noise somewhere, and you get intense fear as if you're back into the accident. You know, it's a couple of those things, but the problem is we go through traumas and we just brush it off, and you know, we don't think of it as, you know, big, but the brain has different ways of reacting to it, and it's good that these discussions are coming up. Yeah.
In 2018, you came out and disclosed your status.
Yeah.
How was that for you? Because we know the stigma that comes around people living HIV positive. How was it for you to make that decision? Nti kati kanveyo nangirire nti nina obulwadde buno. Wava otya, wajja otya okola decision eyo? What was the state of your mind like before you made that decision?
Ekyampaliriza like to do that, it was like stigma. Stigma, because people, when they hear, oh, they know that you're living HIV positive, they keep on like backbiting you, talking back about you, blah blah those things. So then like navayo nwanyise stigma, like to stop stigma in me. Yeah, I came out to stop stigma in me, and now I'm free. I'm very free. No one can stigmatize me, cause it's me who disclosed my HIV status to the world. Yeah, and that's the a better thing to all people living HIV positive. First of all, you have to accept your HIV status. If you accept your HIV status, that's the first medication in your life as a person living HIV positive. Then others comes in. If you accept your HIV status, stigma can go. Yeah.
Wow, that must have been very liberating for you. It's like you get something off your chest, you free your mind, you no longer have to worry about what people have to think about you, or if you're taking your medication, you have to hide, or people discriminating you, distancing themselves. So it's now the other person on the other end to deal with their mind of what they think about you, but for you, you're
for
free.
Me, I'm free. I'm very, very free.
Wow. Thanks for that. Takes
You're
boldness. Claire, what was your experience like in COVID, especially for you as a health worker? How was it for you, that entire thing? It was crazy.
Yeah, it was. But before I answer, I just want to commend you for such a big role. It seems very simple to come out and, you know, publicly fight stigma in your own way, which makes a very big difference. So, very good job.
Thank you.
Then for COVID, I was a first responder during COVID, and we were all unprepared for it. You know, a pandemic that big, that dangerous. We were so unprepared for it. Witnessing lots of deaths in the hospital was a very big shock mentally, you know, that I didn't notice some of the effects of COVID until it ended, until it was done. And the hospital where I was working, there was a lot of burnout. Most of the people I was working with were extremely burnt out. They were very low. They had very low mood, extremely low energy. No one wanted to work. That was after the pandemic. And I started to add 2 and 2 together, because every time I asked someone, when did you start feeling like this? It's related to the pandemic. Now, because in cases of physical emergencies, you know, where it's an emergency of a physical illness, mental health is put in the back seat. You know, if people are dying of a flu, you're not going to think about mental health right away. You're trying to fight this illness. So people are just trying to survive, you know, trying to survive the virus. So in that moment, there was no first aid for the mental, you know, effects of the pandemic. There was no mental first aid. And we started to see these effects come later. Emergencies like that are for physical illnesses, there's usually no first aid for mental health. Yeah. Even though there's a lot of effects that you know affect the psychology of people, there's no help for them during that time. Yeah.
Wow. And you know, I have read an article where research has it that in Uganda, less resources have been directed to mental health. Like, we don't even notice it, as if we are not aware about it. Like, we don't channel the resources or the energy to mental health. Maybe we pay more attention to the physical health, because it's so easy. Anyone else on any other day would feel a headache, flu, malaria, and you go to the hospital. But you will not pay attention to your mental health. And yet, it's like the pivot of everything else. For you to function in your physical body, you might be in your right mind, even waking up to go to work. If you're not mentally stable or happy, it will just affect everything else. And we can see this, like, if you're trying to wake up but you're just literally dragging to work, maybe you're going through a situation, you're too stressed, you're depressed, but you know, you brush it off, you're like, I'll feel better tomorrow, and then you just push yourself to work. So thank you for sharing that with us. Our viewers, please, let's pay attention to our mental health, because it's the pivot of every other thing that we do, even at our workplaces.
And this is why spaces like this are important, because the more we talk about it, the more we normalize it. We have to sing about mental health every day for people to start to think about it.
Yeah, and nekirala, like mental health, erinyo ne kubano, like those who are living HIV positive, I'm on my side. Kati ye wakimanya nti I'm living HIV positive, obwongo bwe buddukira ku yamusiiga. Nekimusigalamu nti this one infected me, era abasinga atuuka n'okufa ng'ekyo kikyamuli mu bwongo, thinking of the other one eyamusiiga who infected him or her. So, and that's a mental health disease. Thinking of that thing, that is stigma. Awo stigma wejjiramu ng'olowooza kwekyo. So kati nganze I like buli kimu nakireka, buli kimu nakyerabira, yansiga namwerabira. So I started a new life, because living HIV positive is just a changing life. It's not a death life sentence. It's just a changing life from negative to positive. So abasinga bakitwala nnyo n'alemera ku ekyo, like obwongo ne bubeera ku ekyo, and other people are dying into denial. Yeah, they are dying into denial nga ye kyo kyokka kyalowoozaako, ekifo ky'okulowooza ku bulamu bwe. Other people are not taking their medication. Ayagala obulamu bwe naye tayagala kumira ddagala, okitegeera. So ekyo ekintu kibali nnyo okubonga, and that's mental health disease. Yeah.
And I think it's because we have that gap in creating awareness on mental health, because I think if people living with HIV who are positive would become aware of such information, if they are sensitized, they would now begin to shift from who caused it, who gave me the virus, and then move forward and see how to live positively like he did. So I am glad we are here at such a time to create such awareness on mental health. Maybe we are reaching out to someone and their lives will change. Yes. So during that time, we saw schools closing for close to 2 years, and our children were sitting home. Parents were schooling now their children from home. And it's not easy to explain to a child who has been going to school on a daily that now you're sitting home because of a pandemic, COVID-19. They'll just get it like that, but they can't internalize it. And I believe it impacted them. It's just like you said, we only get to know the effects after, but we don't, I don't think we paid attention to what these kids were going through, or we never got to know their feelings or their thoughts on these. But probably we get to see such things in maybe the actions that they may do after. Because this is a child who has been going to school, meeting their friends on a daily, and even at home, by the way, they couldn't go out to play with their friends in the neighborhood. Like my daughter, she was asking why her friends were locked in the house. She couldn't play with them. We had to explain to her that some of them actually had contracted, they were sick, so their parents were like protecting them not to come out and pass it on like to others. But it was hard because now a child was sitting in the house from morning to evening, just doing the normal routine, maybe TV or phones, and which also wasn't good for their mental health. So one of the things we want to do as Mind Bus, mostly our interest is in these school-going children, the young ones, because what I have learned is that we look at mental health in adults, but some of it stems from the childhood, things that are not dealt with, and it grows with a person, and they just keep like adding on that, probably the disorder. So addressing such a thing in the adulthood may not be as easy as if it had been addressed when the child was young. So maybe, I don't know, you guys, did you have experiences of teenagers, of those school-going children, any impact from COVID on them?
Yeah, COVID-19 definitely affected children. Now just imagine there are children that come from homes that, are abusive, have domestic violence. And usually school is the happy place for them when they get to go away from home to go to school and avoid, the brutal parents. But now once school is closed, they are spending more time at home. Moreover, enclosed, like you've mentioned. So they faced a lot more abuse because of how much time they were spending at home. And just like in all, things, all kinds of trauma, be it death of a person, barely do we consider what the child thinks. We usually think they don't know what's happening, and then we just move on. We don't sit with them like you got to sit with your daughter. That it rarely happens. We don't involve them. We don't even ask about what they think or what they feel, what is going on. So they do get affected. And as for the teenagers that were spending a lot more time at home, with peer groups, some of them got into drugs, some of them, because of, too much time on their hands, some of them got into substances. So it is a very good thing to want to focus, on the mental health of children and adolescents, especially post-pandemic, to try and, do some kind of recovery for this, this vulnerable population. Yeah, I think it's a very good thing.
Arafat, what do you have to say
Uh,
about that?
To say about that, during that pandemic, teenagers abasinga like bafunamu obuzibu like education wise. Abamu like kangeze nti abamu they were supposed, they are those ones who were like in senior 4s, senior 3s, and they wanted to go in senior 4s, senior 5, senior 6. And that pandemic yabakosamuko. Abamu kibaluma ne kati bakyogera, like they tell me or they tell other people, kale singa kati I'm in senior 5, singa kati I'm senior 6, singa I completed senior 6, you know. Ekyo kintu kyabakosa nnyo and it's still kikyabaliko ku bwongo.
Yeah, and how many children became mothers at 12, 13, 14 during the pandemic? Who is supporting them, you know?
And they are those ones nga okusoma kwabwe kwakomaawo. Yeah.
Wanga kati ndaba omwana omuto afunye olubuto. Already ayina stress ya pandemic, then afunye olubuto, then tagenda kuddayo ku ssomero. Ate n'engeri kati ffe abazadde abamu engeri gye tutwalamu omwana aba afunye olubuto ewaka, omulala ajja kumugoba, amugobere ebweru, genda ewooyo yakufunisa olubuto olwo. So kati kyongera stress ku stress. Ayina stress avudde mu ssomero, afunye olubuto, mama we amugobye, omuvubuka naye mutwalo mufunisizza, naye ali eri ali
beeyiya bonna beeyiya.
And if they have to look for food, mental health is at the back of their priority list, because they need the basics are not met. They don't have shelter, they don't have food. They're not going to care about whether they are feeling depressed or not. Yeah.
They don't even recognize it because they have not known mental health. They have not had it, so they don't recognize it. I'll tell you something we always joked about with my sister when we were young. Like, if I woke up and I told her I had a nightmare, she was like, "Twaleli," you know, brush it off, and then would joke about it and say, well, if it were a white child abroad there, they would take that child for therapy because they had a nightmare, and this is going to like haunt them for a while. They will be scared. Each time it's night, they don't want to go to their bed because they remember that nightmare. But us, probably, I don't want to generalize, but in Africa or in Uganda, you as a child will have their nightmare, they wake up and say, maybe I dreamt of a lion, and the parents just laugh, you know. And you're not like, and you don't even sit with this child probably to get the detail of the entire dream and maybe see it's creating that fear in them and address it. So we still have a long way to go.
Yeah, we definitely have a very long way to go. However, we have moved some steps, you know. Such conversations are happening now. They weren't happening a few years ago. So I am very positive that, you know, if such conversations keep coming up, the more awareness that will be created. Yeah.
And, well, one thing we also want to do is to engage school administrations so that we push this mental health awareness down to the schools, to sensitize the teachers so that when they are dealing with these children, they pay attention to their behavior, to what they say, and look out maybe for those signals. Maybe there's something wrong here or here, so that it's addressed at an early age.
Yeah.
Yes. Wow. This is really interesting. Well, we won't forget workplace during this pandemic. Many people stayed at home. Like, if I'm to think of people in the market, you remember what happened? Like, it was lockdown, and those women, like in Nakasero, literally,
they brought them
they brought their mosquito nets, the beds in the markets. They could not go home because, I mean, this is someone who is fending for their families. If they stayed home because of a lockdown, their children, their families are not going to eat. They take care of many people. So for them, they thought it wise, let's camp at the workplace and be able to what? To earn, because food, we can't do without food. And then if you go to the corporate world, many people, by the way, were laid off. People lost their jobs globally during the pandemic. I have a friend of mine, a very close friend. She lost her job in that time, in the second phase. Because, I mean, it was tough for businesses, for organizations. They could not still meet expenses as usual. So she was laid off, and she's a single mother. You can imagine. She has 2 kids. She was fending for them. I can't imagine what she went through emotionally. I know she was having a hard time. But now that we discuss mental health, I believe it must have hit her hard, thinking through all those different things. I don't know. How was it like for you?
Yeah, so many people, I'm very sure, went through a lot of stress during the pandemic, because you can imagine you're sleeping outside. For the women that are working in the market, it's raining on you. I mean, it's very inconducive, but once the pandemic is over, life has to move on as usual. We don't take a break to actually have a conversation with the ladies, to just have some kind of outlet for them and what they went through. And even in the corporate world, once the pandemic ended, people were expected back in offices with no kind of debrief. It's now normal. And you see, eventually it catches up. Eventually, this is the burnout that we see in the corporate world, and the reduced productivity, because if your mind is not right, eventually productivity reduces. Just like we've said when we're defining mental health, for you to be in perfect mental health, okay, let me not say perfect, but like in good mental health, your productivity contributes to your mental health. For you to be mentally healthy, you have to be productive to your full potential. And when that's affected, productivity goes down. And this is a time that we try to come out to ask for some kind of counseling, basic counseling in the corporate offices. I mean, even if it's just group therapy, where people will just have conversations, groups to just talk about experiences. It hasn't been done a lot in so many of the corporate offices, and even for example, the women in the market, and everyone, even a single mother that's home, can get some kind of relief from church, where if she's asked to express herself and talk about her experiences and, get help here and there. But then the other point is, for example, the friend that you have who is very stressed about food for her children, school fees for her children, she won't think of this as important, She will put her feelings and her emotions at the back because the basic needs are not met, and for her in that moment, they are priority. Yeah, so it's a broad problem, I believe, and I'm grateful for the baby steps that are being made. However, it's very big. Yeah, it is, because I remember people were walking from their homes to town because they would not use borders, they would not use taxis. But I can imagine this lady or a gentleman sitting at home with all the dependents looking at them for food, and they have nothing to offer. So, I mean, they went against all odds, risking breaking the guidelines. That's true.
The guidelines to go out and work. That's a very important point.
No one gave a feed out COVID.
Sorry.
You know why? By that time, 2020, so I quit a bit of COVID. I had my beautiful wife, my beautiful family, but time came I have nothing. During pandemic, she decided to leave me. And it was because of pandemic, I lost my job. Then there I had nothing, like to do at home, like to share everything, like okoza ekintu kyonna ewaka nga by then mulimu gwali guweddewo nga sina kyensobola providing naye nga providing akatono naye yalowooza munasonyiwa yalowooza nti ogenda n'owa benzi kijja kujjawo covid
agenda muwa byayagala
akyali ku muzigo gende ku muzigo
so kati nkubyamu akafaananyi oyina stress y'okufiirwa omulimu oyina stress
y'omukazi ogenda
kubanga kati pandemic eno fena twali tetugyetegekedde yajja ne fears zaayo abantu bafa left right and center kati okyatya nti ekirwadde kigenda kunkwata oba nange nfe toyina mulimu temuyina kasente mweyiya kati mukyala we yandibaddewo akwesapoti
yasalawo akola ekyo
n'afuluma kwegana n'akwongera stress baithaye kino tukisekeramu naye
kintu kyampisa bubi nnyo
because it was stress onto stress onto stress. Wow.
And you see, so many people are like Arafat, you know, in different ways. But we have, you know, we don't have spaces where he can go because he needs to go somewhere to have a chat, to you know, just because you see, we are a couple of months post-pandemic, but as he talks about it, it's still hurtful to him.
Yes.
You know, and eventually these things, we start to see the effects. I know that most centers that treat persons with HIV have counselors. I don't know, have you tried to seek for some kind of counseling?
I do.
You do? I think that's, it may not be adequate for all your stressors, but it is something.
I'm now fine.
That's good.
But you still dread the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I believe there are many other homes out there that were affected because, I mean, here everyone else was staying at home compared to how everyone went out to work, spent their time at work and came home. But from morning to evening, you're looking at each other and you're even noticing each other's mistakes that you had probably never seen. I have a friend who joked about something like that time the husband was over complaining about the untidiness. Kano kutoka jeo, what is that doing there? You know, he had all the time to see. And you see, now they were picking on each other and that could have like also sparked off violence in some homes, a lot of disagreements. So COVID, when we talk about marriages, for something I've read that for some marriages they were actually repaired because now these guys had time together. But again, for some, it went south.
Yeah, there was a lot of reports on domestic violence during COVID. Yes, so it is, you know, like that explanation of, you know, someone is in your space 24/7 because even your coping mechanisms have been limited. For some people that, you know, like to go out and have a chat with their friends, it was limited. They couldn't do that, you know. Your coping mechanism, for those that, you know, loved to go to the gym, they couldn't do that. For those that loved to engage in different activities, were all limited. So your coping mechanisms were cut off while the stressors were there in full swing. So it was a very tough time for sure.
Mpiziyita buli kaseera. Tolina budde bugenda laba mupiira. Every time ali waka tasobola atambula.
I can imagine, like, say, a man in this case, or a woman, because a man who is not working, is not providing, and is noticing all the things about this lady, gets all that stress of the pandemic, the mistakes he's noticing, and then he will end up battering the woman.
Kuba.
Or even the woman will just take off that stress onto the children because she cannot give them food. She's so stressed about the entire thing, and then she just lashes it out on the kids. It was a terrible time. It was a terrible time.
True.
Well, when we talk about the stresses, the anxieties, I remember the particular anxiety that always came with presidential address. You remember that time? The president is going to address on this particular date.
Everyone can be on TV
yes,
waiting.
everyone was running and waiting to see, are they lifting the lockdown? Are we going back to work? So, I mean, you're anxious, and then it's not lifted, and then you go back down into the depression. So the kind of feelings that were flying therein were also not healthy for people's mental health, because there's a lot of anxiety, there's fear, there's depression. It's a lot, like you said, people will not move out, because I've learned that, for example, when you go to the gym and exercise, there's something that comes off your brain. It frees your mind. Even when you had maybe had a long day, you kind of just unwind and clear your head and feel better.
Going
But
out,
it
jazzing
was
with your
so,
friends.
Yes, it was so congested. Imagine looking at just 4 walls, getting out to the gate area, coming. It was a tough time.
Yeah.
But you, Claire, you interacted, because you were out there, you were the front line dealing with patients and all. So, all these, the stress, the anxieties, how did you manage them? Even in your among your colleagues, the patients, how did you manage to overcome these?
Yes, so during the pandemic itself, there was very little managing happening. We were just holding on, we were just surviving. Surviving the next day, There was very little managing. And most of the help that has happened post-pandemic, because in as much as we had very many patients that were worried, very fearful, but priority was don't get the virus, so stay in your house. We can't do anything right now. You can't come out because the biggest fear was the virus. And so there was very little, even for us as health workers, you were only trying to keep patients alive and keep yourself safe. That was all that was happening during the pandemic. And any kind of help that has happened has been post-pandemic, and it's still ongoing because we are very fresh out of the pandemic. So it is still ongoing, but I can assure you there was very little, help going on during the pandemic. Mental help, very little of it, yeah.
But I can't imagine what that was for you. Like you said, you were only managing patients and also making sure you're safe. So I can't help thinking how you balance that, because here you are trying not to contract the virus, yet you have to help. How was that like for you? Like in your mind, each day you go out there, you're like, I might contract this, take it back to my family, and yet I have to help.
You have to
the
keep
patients.
going. Yeah, it was a period of pushing on and pushing on and pushing on, and I guess as human beings, we have resources in us that we are capable of surviving, I would say, until those resources are exceeded, until you've used all the resources that you have in you. That's when you now either break down, or that's when the ones that you have can no longer serve you. So I would say during that time we had the resources in us that were able to just push on and push on and push on. But you see, post-pandemic, you realize that they wore out, and you needed extra support. You needed to go through therapy yourself. And we don't even normalize seeing deaths every day. It's not normal to have 5 people die every single day. It does do something to you, but I'm glad, at least in places where I work, there's psychotherapy being given to health workers, especially regarding the pandemic. Yeah.
No, because they were exposed to a lot of trauma firsthand. You see this one breaking down, one dying here, right and center. It was tough.
Yeah. Wow. It did take a toll. And I mean, if that kind of psychotherapy can extend to health workers everywhere. I know there are places that have started it, which is a very good thing. It would help a lot because, you know, I mean, the pandemic happened, we were all unready for it. But, you know, now we've learned. So putting resources like that in hospitals, I think is important. Not only for this period post-pandemic, but also initiating them in care so that, God forbid, another pandemic comes, we are more prepared to deal with the mental health as well, and not just the physical health. Yeah,
that's true. Wow. Arafat, you mentioned you are unable to access medicine for treat your medicine and other people that were depending on you. So what happened? What did you do? Didn't, like, you guys never took medication at all, or did you find help after?
No, it was like this. We got medication, but it was a very, 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 like, it was very hard to get. Naye nga kye twakola, like, nagenda ku ddwaliro, nakuba ku ddwaliro essimu, ne banfunira emmotoka. Just because for me, they know me. I disclose my status to the world. They know me. Nsobola okuyamba buli omu. So banfunira emmotoka, nimba nga nsupplyinga in every corner, naayagala eddagala. Era ekyo kyanyamba nnyo. Ninga ate era tekyejjaako kiri nti abaana kyabayisa bubi. Wali abaamisingamu for few days. Kitegeera. Era ne kati kikyabaliko kuba akubira n'akubuuza naye sijjayisibwa bubi. Sijjayisibwa bubi, okitegeera, cause you don't have to miss up your medication. Okitegeera. Naye nga life goes on. Naye ekyo kintu kale olaba abantu bonna in this life we're living in, as people living HIV positive, some of them they need care. Like care. Nga sigama muno omuwadde sente omuwadde eki naye nga love, that love of them, to give them, okugyawo stigma eyo, okubeera naye olina beera mukwano gwe, obutamuteekako stigma eri emubeereko. Omanyi muntu bw'omwewala ennyo n'omusosola, you discriminate him or her, kiri kijja ngamba I'm not a human being, I'm not like these people. So kireeta mental health n'abanga obwongo bwe tebuteredde. Kitegeera. So era nkozesa omukisa guno wano wennyini wendi ku platform okubiriza abantu, please don't discriminate people living HIV positive. Don't discriminate people living HIV positive. Just show them love, show us love, give us whatever we want in life. Kubanga bw'onondaga omukwano sijja siga mulala. Kitegeera. Bw'onolaga oyo omukwano omulala ajja kuyamba omulala ali positive oba tajja siga. You know, these people, when you discriminate them, they end up ate n'okusiga abalala. N'asiiga ono, n'asiiga oli. Ate gwe amudiscriminate nze ajja kwekanga ng'era akasize mu family eyo ne katuuka ku gwe. Yeah.
Well, clearly this is a mental health issue because, I mean, the state of their mind, they feel discriminated and they say, okay, if I'm not loved, let me also spread it so that, you know, we are many.
Why don't I do
want
this?
to feel that satisfaction. So it's something really that needs to be addressed, the mental health.
And stigma has been a broad topic in HIV, just like he has said, but also in mental illness. You know, very many of us where we come from, if there was a patient on the streets, they were either excluded, some were beaten, you know. So as we speak about stigma, it is very crucial that we address it for the patients with HIV. But also for the patients with a mental illness. Yeah, it is such a broad topic, and these things, you know, these talks that are spreading awareness will contribute to reducing stigma and that discrimination, because people believe that, you know, mental illness is for those other people. But, you know, someone once said that if you have a brain, you can't get mental illness, because mental illness is a disorder of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
So for as long as you have a brain, you're a candidate. You can get mental illness at any time. So I guess in follow-up conversations, we can have broader conversations on stigma, but it's a very big topic to bring up, to create awareness, to prevent stigma in persons with HIV plus people with a mental illness. Yeah.
Wow, that brings me to stigma related to mental health because someone might want to seek help, but they fear they will be regarded as either mad or, I mean, how we've branded it, that if someone is going through rehab, they will quickly say he's doing drugs. You get it? They will write about them on social media and all that. We've seen this in our artists and so forth. So I have a feeling that people will even fail to reach out for help because they think if I go to rehab, or people will start saying I do drugs, I'll be all over social media. So there's also that stigma related to a mental health disorder, which we want to speak against, because like you said, if you have a mind, if you have a brain, you're a candidate of, and you know, the causes of mental health disorders are quite many, because there's a disorder that will come out of grief. For example, you've lost a loved one and you're grieving. There's that disorder that will come because you go into depression. So we shouldn't look at mental health disorder solely brought by addictions, because addiction is also another form now of disorder, but not entirely. There are actually quite many disorders, different forms that will come from grief, from addictions, from traumas suffered, now like my accident. It's just a lot. Yeah, and it's not really nice to constantly conclude that if someone is going to rehab or is suffering a depression or something, it's drugs, and it's not nice, because when we do that kind of stigma, it will curtail this, like the awareness slows down. Yeah.
And the other people will just hide themselves inside. They'll say, they will stigmatize me. Let me just keep quiet here. They'll end up dying.
Yeah.
And many people are dying into denial because of stigma.
Yeah, that is very true. Well, we have had very lasting effects of the pandemic still with us, from businesses closing. Some businesses have not really recovered. Organizations are still struggling. Economies of governments are still struggling. Even here in Uganda, we can see it. Now, we talked about children, the girls who had early pregnancies, early marriages, and these things are still living with us. And we want to call out to all concerned leaders, community leaders, church leaders, school administrators, everyone who has that potential to reach out and offer that help to address mental health in the different areas, because, and most importantly, by the way, as parents, I think we should begin to pay attention to our children. Their feelings, because most times you brush it off and say this child is very stubborn. Oh, we need daluli inji, but there's something underneath there. Yeah.
Very true.
Wow, this has been a very fruitful discussion. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Arafat.
Thanks for hosting me.
Our pleasure. By the way, we want to really say that we are so proud of you.
Thank you.
Having come out and disclosed your HIV status. I believe from after our viewers watch this, you've touched someone's life out there.
And you have to tell them I'll be here. Always.
Yes, we shall keep bringing him back. But it's very important, like how he disclosed his status. This cleared his mind, like he's free. You see, he's freely speaking about it, and he has no fear whatsoever.
And I've got many friends.
Wow.
Just because of that thing okusalawo okola kyovaayo nenkyogera nti I'm living HIV positive. Era n'okutuuka wano it's because I disclose my HIV status.
Yeah, sure.
I'm free. Obwongo bwange buli steady nnyo. Biri nabyerabira. Era singa buli omu akoppanze. Tiki singa n'akawuka kagwa mu nsi.
Well, thank you so much, our viewers. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Mindbus. That will support Uganda. Like, comment, and share these videos because they are going to touch lives. And let us join hands to do this together to sensitize mental health, and all of us shall have a better place to live. Thank you so much. Maybe Claire, could you give your closing remarks on all this that we've had?
Yeah, this is a very good space that you've started, and mental health is very broad, you know. This was a bit of an introduction into mental health, and, you know, you can decide to break it down, but also, like you involved Arafat, if you can involve peers, people living with mental illness, it could help one person or another, you know, listening to them, but people like you that are bringing up these conversations on mental health and mental illness are doing a very good job creating awareness and reducing stigma. And the more we talk about it, the better it gets. We shouldn't stop talking about mental health until, you know, we can proudly seek for mental help, you know, without worrying about what my neighbor thinks.
Yeah, as we are spreading the awareness, I want to tell everyone there that someone who's looking does not describe his or her status. The first thing you have to do before going into practicing sex, first go for blood test. It's the only way to go. And if you test HIV positive, your first medication is to accept your status. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you. It was nice having you both. Until next time, it's bye for now.